Good morning, everyone. Let the record show we have a quorum present and the necessary civil servants who need to be in attendance are here. So welcome to everyone, and we'll try to get started. So I'll ask the sergeant to bring in Miss Heather Booth and have her sworn in, please. No, unfortunately, at the time it's in.
Heather Booth. I swear by Almighty God that the evidence I shall give to this honorable legislative assembly shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Salome Trinidad, I swear by Almighty God that the evidence I shall give to this honorable legislative assembly shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Thank you, Sergeant at Arms, and my apologies. I should have let the listening public know what we're doing this morning in these hearings, but we're dealing with the Cayman Islands Health Services Authority financial statements and audit report for ending the 30th of June 2016. And at this time, I'll invite the Auditor General to make any opening statements you'd wish to make.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The HSA was established in July 2002 under the Health Services Authority law. Up until the year ending 30th of June 2010, the HSA was unable to complete financial statements and therefore received disclaimers of opinion for each and every year up until that point. From the year ended 30th of June 2011 onwards, the HSA has received qualified audit opinions. And consistent with recent years, I issued a qualified audit opinion for the HSA's financial statements for the year ended 30th of June 2016, with 3 bases for qualification. The first 2 points of qualification are related. The first one relates to uncertainty around patient services fees completeness, because HSA lack internal controls to enable management to adequately assert that their reported patient fee income is complete. Closely related to this first qualification point is the second, which is the uncertainty regarding the associated accounts receivable. Due to the impact of the completeness issues, there are issues that impeded our ability to complete procedures in order to reach audit conclusions about the bad debt provision and write-off. And I know, and I'm sure witnesses today will be referencing, that recently the HSA have employed Deloitte to undertake some review and do some consultancy work around this area with a view to trying to move away from these qualification points. The third qualification, again, is not unique to the HSA, but relates to not having a recorded liability for post-employment healthcare under the government plan. In addition to the qualified audit opinion, the HSA law, the Health Services Authority law requires a minimum cash reserve, and the HSA have not been able to achieve that, and therefore I've also reported the breach in cash. So for the 30th of June 2016, they were some 21.5 million below the calculated legal requirement. In terms of giving a bit of an overview about the income and expenditure at the HSA, for the year ended 30th of June 2016, 105.2 million was the total HSA revenue, of which 89.5 million, or some 85%, was income from patient services. 13.1 million, or 12.4%, was from government programmes, and 2.6 million, or 2.5%, other income. HSA total expenditure for the same year was 105.2 million, of which staff costs of 62.5 million, or 59.4%, and provision for bad debts of 14 million, supplies and materials of 12 million were the most significant components. So for the year 2015-16, HSA recorded a very small net income of just under 68,000. However, that was before other comprehensive losses for the year, resulting from the remeasurement of the defined benefit pension, were deducted of 1.75 million. This resulted in a total comprehensive loss of 1.684 million for the year. The financial statements also reflect the significant challenges the HSA faces in collecting its revenues, and on which this committee has had a hearing before. The provision for bad debts at the end of 2015-16 was 94.5 million on a total accounts receivable of 122.3 million. So that's the equivalent of just over a 77% impairment rate. Over the last 5 years, the HSA has made additional provisions for bad debt of 64.6 million and has written off bad debts totaling 27 million. While the increase in provision is growing year on year, it's pleasing that the annual increase in the provision is gradually reducing. The HSA reported a net current asset position of 22.6 million, giving good liquidity through a current ratio of 2.12. And again, this is an improvement on last year. Current liabilities include pension liabilities of 13.3 million. With respect to its statement of financial position at the 30th of June 2016, the HSA reported a healthy position with net worth of over 94 million and with more than sufficient resources to meet its liabilities, meaning there are no concerns about its ability to operate into the future. However, it's worth noting that the HSA has generally accumulated deficits of 70 million since it came into existence, and the positive position in its ability to continue operating reflects the significant equity injections of over 138.3 million over the years from the government. Indeed, 2015-16 saw a further equity increase of 7 million to the HSA, although the bulk of this, some 6.4 million, related to debt to equity reclassification, as it was related to the forgiveness of a debt for insurance premiums. My colleagues and I will be happy to assist the committee with any questions during the course of the day, and I have with me Patrick Smith, who is the Director of the Financial Audit Practice, Winston Sobers, who is an audit manager on the financial audit side, and Ruel Hewitt, who leads the HSA audit. Thank you.
Thank you very much, AG. Good morning, Mrs. Booth. I guess I'll lead off with the questions and then open it up for the thing. How long have you been the CFO at the HSA?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. 12 years.
12 years. The evidence given to us in the when we had the hearings on the 2014, 2015 accounts was that the HSA was expecting to get a clean opinion or an unqualified opinion by December 2018. Can you give us an outline of what progress has been made towards that and how do you expect to achieve that?
Mr. Chairman, the Auditor General outlined the 4 major qualification points. The patient services fees and the patient-related accounts receivable. The concern is based on the lack of internal control. And we had engaged an independent audit firm to review our financial controls and processes. And the document was received in July 2017, and we're actively working on implementing those controls, and we expect to complete it by the end of this fiscal year. The post-employment health costs is related to the lack of an estimate for this liability due to the absence of an actuarial valuation. To address this point, the HSA engaged with an international actuarial company who has provided us with a valuation in August 2017. And now we have a valuation basis to make the appropriate provision and disclosure with respect to the post-employment healthcare costs. The accumulative deficit, based on the Auditor General's concern, was relating to the non-recognition of post-employee health care benefit. And with continued work with our actuaries, we expect to remove this qualification to a matter of emphasis in early years.
Through you, Mr. Chair. What's the cost of this report, ma'am?
The report from Deloitte, Mr. Chairman, through you, 179, I think.
Can you give us a synopsis of your roles and responsibility? Because isn't the review of the internal controls and the recommendations and implementing thereof part of your remit as CFO?
My role, Mr. Chairman, the question is my role as it relates to the implementation of internal control. Yeah. Yes, Mr. Chairman, that's a part of my role.
So, in the 12 years that you've been there, how often have you looked at the internal controls and stuff that you have in place and made recommendations to the CEO up to the board to put in place certain controls?
Mr. Chairman, throughout the years, the HSA has a wide variety of operations. And what we did was a step-by-step approach in looking at the internal controls that exist. Prior to HSA being an authority, the staff complement and the associated procedures were lacking, and what we conducted was a review first of the overall position and gradually eliminate the low-hanging fruits controls that were in existence.
So the HSA was created in 2002, right? And during that period of time, your review of the procedures and controls, I don't want to say was inadequate, but your reviewing those stuff has led to the HSA having to spend $189,000 to bring in a consultant firm to recommend controls?
Mr. Chairman, when the HSA started in 2002, there were no books on which the HSA could operate or information as how we executed our financial management. And over the years, we have eliminated some of the internal control issues as it relates to inventory, the documentation of accounts into our books, recognition and incorporation of our work. The the patient services fees and accounts receivable encompass a variety of employees. It is not isolated to one department. It's what we call the revenue cycle has a clinical arm to it and an administrative arm. So what we did was look at the standards that needed to be created so that we have overall document outlining what needs to be done and what steps need to be implemented to capture the overall revenue and expenses of the organization. We did not have an accounting charge or nothing within the HSA in 2005 when I joined the authority.
Through you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Ms. Booth, for coming here this morning. Just so we're clear, this is the first time since the HSA started that we are using consultants to help the organization.
Mr. Chairman, through you, in 2005, I believe, or 2003, before my time, a consultant came. And throughout my tenure, this is the first consultant that has come in since 2005.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. True. The reason I asked the question is that when the HSA started in 2002, I am aware that Ernst & Young was actually hired as consultants to set up to our organizational chart and everything else in terms of the finance function and other functions. So I was just a little bit surprised that that was done. Well, clearly, what you're saying is that when you arrived, is that Ernst & Young report was basically never implemented. And as such, 12 years now, we have basically brought in another consulting firm to basically tell the hospital or advise the hospital on how to measure their income and other internal controls. So the thing about it is, and I'm going to tell you, just so we're all clear and for everyone present, what it is I'm expecting to get from today, and just so we're clear, I've taken the balanced scorecard approach in terms of how businesses should operate or how entities should operate. The balanced scorecard approach basically looks at 4 primary metrics. It looks at the financial performance of a business. It looks at their internal controls. It looks at their processes. And it also looks at their ability to bring out new products and new services. For the purpose of this portion of the question and answers section, we be primarily more focused on the financial performance and on the internal controls. And what we're looking for, and what me in particular expect to get out of today, is some level of confidence that, one, the HSA and its senior management staff and its leadership team is aware of their responsibilities to the Cayman Islands community. And second, that they're on the right path. And hopefully by the end of today, I will leave with some level of confidence that those who are charged with the administration of healthcare in this island, something that is very vital, is on the right path. So what I'm looking for is a certain amount of confidence. I know the HSA has its own challenges, and it is very easy for, I guess, being in your position to be very defensive, and that's normal, that's human nature. One of the things I've said it publicly, and I just want to repeat it here today, that there's some areas of government that we should never play politics with, and healthcare is one of them, for the nature that it has. So what we're looking for today, at least me, I can speak for me, what I'm looking for is that level of confidence that, one, the management is aware of the issues, and two, that they're on the right path in which to fix those issues. But before we can even fix an issue, first we have to recognize that there is an issue. And what it is that I guess scares me the most, just looking at the 2015, 2016, is when I see staff costs are up 4.5 million, but revenues are only up 2.2 million. The first thing jumps out to me is a certain amount of inefficiencies. And it is those issues that I need some level of comfort today that we are on the right path to make sure that we have health care, or we can provide health care that is sustainable in the long run and not a burden to the taxpayers of this country. So I just need to clear the air in that regard, so people can understand where I'm coming from, and so you can understand where it is I'm coming from. So what we're looking for is the issues surrounding those internal controls, because at the end of the day, as auditors, one of the first things you come in and you test is internal controls. If the internal controls are strong, you can rely on the information that is coming out. If they're weak, you have to do a lot more testing. And so it is important for us to get these internal controls. And when I'm seeing the trending in terms of where the numbers are going, it is that lack of the internal controls. It has now become tantamount or very important that we actually get it right. So I'm curious in terms of the Deloitte report. Do we have a copy of that? You can provide members with?
Mr. Chairman, through you, yes, sir.
Okay, good. So I'll be curious to see the recommendations that would have come from that report. Because at the end of the day, we're just here to make sure that, one, you guys are just doing it right. So I just needed to, I don't want you to feel as if though it's the Inquisition or anything like that. That's not our goal here. You know what I mean? So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. You were presented basically with a clean slate, in that there were no existing financial rules and regulations and procedures when you went in. So you had the opportunity to put the best standards in place, which you would be aware of, being a qualified individual, right?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Yeah, I just want, every year in Finance Committee, this Legislative Assembly allocates substantial funds. In 2016, the total was 19 million for specific purposes at the HSA. Let me give you an example. HEA 17, medical care beyond insurance cover or uninsured, $2,020,000. Can you explain to me what procedures you have put in place to access that money and how it is allocated for in your income stream?
Mr. Chairman, uninsured children, the procedure that we have in place is that an assessment is done at the back office to ensure that persons who are Caymanian or residents of the Cayman Islands do not have insurance or underinsure. What we also do, we inform the Health Insurance Commission if the persons do not have insurance before they can access that output. And over the past couple of years, that amount has been reduced, the amount allocated for uninsured, due to our continuous work with NAU to identify persons who are Caymanian who can be transferred to an indigent status.
I think you're misunderstanding my question. We know what the money is for. If I show up at the hospital, I give you my health insurance card. I'm assuming, correct me if I'm wrong, that at that point, when I hand you my insurance card, you have the ability to electronically determine instantly whether the insurance card is active, whether it is my insurance card, i.e. through picture ID on the card or in your system, some other form of identification. And it will also tell you whether my insurance for the year has been consumed, right? You can do all of that now.
Mr. Chairman, not everything. For some insurance companies, they have a portal, an insurance portal for which we can obtain eligibility. Accumulator benefit sometimes is not an easy information to acquire. We have approximately 11 insurance companies that uses our facility, and at least 70% of them provide an eligibility portal. The portal only indicates that they have insurance, but not necessarily that that service that they're requesting is actually covered.
But why would you accept insurance from a company that is not complying with the legislation and providing you with that information?
The legislation, sorry, Mr. Chairman, the legislation requires that persons have insurance. Also, the insurance companies, they do have something, some portal, but after 5, it's a telephone call for some insurance companies. The 24-hour access is not available for all insurance companies.
How long has that been going on?
In 2000, Mr. Chairman, in 2005, we had no insurance portal then. But today, 2017, more than 70% of the insurance companies, they do have a portal. So we're gradually interacting with them to ensure that they improve the information availability to the HSA.
So you have no way of knowing whether the insurance has consumed the allowable for the year.
Mr. Chairman, no, sir.
Okay. Then how do you access a vote in government provided for by this parliament that is specifically for care beyond insurance coverage?
Mr. Chairman, could you repeat the question?
Okay, we have a vote for $2 million, 20,000, that is specifically for people who have used up all of their insurance for the year. How do you access that $2 million, and how do you draw down from government money from that account?
Mr. Chairman, the insurance company will indicate after presentation of various invoices to them that the insurance has been maximized. So it's from that we will know that they are underinsured or insufficient insurance coverage.
Okay, so customer B shows up, and by a series of invoices being denied because they have reached their maximum, you know that that person has used up their allowance for the year, correct?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
How do you then access the coverage that this legislative provides for that person?
So, Mr. Chairman, additional financial assessment is done on that patient.
But there should be no requirement for financial assistance. The vote is very
Financial
specific.
assessment, sorry.
Of assessment, because the vote is very specific. The vote is specifically for people who have used up their insurance for the year. That's the only assessment that should be necessary. Let me see if I can, because we consume a lot of time here, going on in circles. How does government pay you this $2 million a year?
Mr. Chairman, the HSA provide an invoice to the ministry with the detail of the medical service and the name of the patient.
So you do that monthly, quarterly?
Mr. Chairman, monthly.
So you submit to government a list of people and the services that you provided because they've accessed it, and you're paid according to that invoice.
Mr. Chairman, yes.
Okay. And you said it was being reduced. How come then your projection in the 2017 financial year is exactly the same amount that you got in 2016? $2,020,000. How do you generate the amount that you asked government to provide in that vote?
Mr. Chairman, we look at the trend of access to the program, and make the projection, because with healthcare, it is on an unpredictable environment, and the estimate is provided to the government in the event that these patients are presented to the HSA. If the funds are underutilized, we do not draw down on the allocation.
So, and that would be a similar system would exist across all of these votes. Medical care for indigents, which we know requires a NAU, ambulance services, mental health services, geriatric services, medical care for chronic ailments. All of those are drawn down on a patient billing system.
Mr. Chairman, yes, sir. Except for ambulances and operating loss.
Ambulance,
Ambulance services.
but we giving you $2,247,293, and you say ambulance services are costing more than that per year.
Mr. Chairman, the revenue generated for the ambulance service against the expenditure, whatever that loss is what is billed to the government with a detailed costing report submitted to them.
So you're losing 2.2 million. You lost 2.2 million in the 2015-16 year on ambulance services.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Do you bill insurance companies that cover ambulance services for ambulance services called?
Mr. Chairman, yes, sir.
So can you tell me, would you happen to have it there, what is the total cost of your ambulance services for the year? If you're losing 2 million, what's the revenue?
Mr. Chairman, the gross revenue from ambulance service is 1.1 million.
So and that is based on billings. Are you suggesting that this 2.2 million is not billed, or it is billed for people who don't pay? Do you bill for every ambulance call?
Mr. Chairman, not for all ambulance call. At some instances, when the ambulance is called, the patient might indicate that they're not willing to go with the ambulance, but it is still an ambulance run and it is an expense.
Okay, but for all ambulances that do on a call, that make a delivery to the hospital, you bill somebody.
Mr. Chairman, yes, sir.
Okay, and you're billing, and you're only receiving 1/3 of what you're billing for? Because if you're collecting 1 point something million.
Sorry,
But
Mr.
you-
Chairman, just through you, sir, and I think we're in the same track. I guess we're trying to get to, if you're losing 2.2 million and you're making 1.1 million in revenue, that means the total cost for the ambulance care per year is 3.3 million. And just through you again, Mr. Chairman, just out of curiosity, how many people do we have in the ambulance unit working?
Mr. Chairman, through you, at least 3 persons. We have 3 locations that we cover: East, North Side, West Bay, and Georgetown. And it's a 24-hour shift.
So there are 3 persons in each shift. I'm just trying to get like the total number of staff in that unit.
Mr. Chairman, through you, the estimate, I believe, is around 28, I believe. But
Okay.
I can provide that information to the committee.
Okay, thank you.
So none of these votes that I just detailed are paid out to from the ministry, I would assume. Ministry of Health would be paying them on a monthly basis or a quarterly basis. They're all billed for individually according to patient costs.
Mr. Chairman, yes, sir.
Okay. All right. But let's talk a little bit about the other big concern
So,
is
sorry, Mr. Chairman, just before you move off from the ambulance, roughly, just ballparkish, what would be the average cost for each of the staff members in that unit? I mean, staff what, like 50,000 a year or whatever.
Mr. Chairman, through you, can I provide that information at a later date? Because the combination of staff on the ambulance is an EMS, a general EMS, and a paramedic. And I think different levels of coverage is provided on the ambulance.
Okay, like which should be the more senior person there? The paramedic?
Paramedic.
And what's
Yes,
the ballpark salary for paramedic is what?
Mr. Chairman, I don't remember at this point in time. I can provide that
Well,
information.
just so you're aware, Miss Booth, where I'm getting at is, I mean, if I even take 30 staff at an average of even 60,000 per year in terms of cost, let's even say 70,000 when you factor in all the costs, you're still looking at around 2.1 million. So I would just be curious to know where where I'm getting at, where the additional 1.2 million in costs in that area would come from to generate that 3.3 million in cost. So that's what we're pretty much looking for.
Mr. Chairman, through you, the ambulance operation in terms of servicing the vehicle, fluid in the vehicle, for providing human resource services, IT overhead costs, healthcare are some of the costs that are associated with employing staff to the HSA.
Yeah, and that's what one of the things that we're looking at, just so we clear through you, Mr. Chairman, is just pretty much and this goes back to the point I made earlier in terms of level of efficiencies. Because one of the things that we just want to make sure at the end of the day is that there is a certain amount of efficiencies. And one of the things that, like I said, if you have 3.3 million in costs and you're only getting 1.1 million, then and the taxpayers are picking up the 2.2 million, we'd be curious to know what that 2.2 million would come from, which segues into my next question in terms of looking at the 2016 financial statements, where you have roughly of the three revenues line between patient services fees and other income, that total is 92 million. I'd be curious, of that 92 million, what percentage would be government related, what percentage would be, and again, this is just ballpark, from insurance companies, and then what would be from, I guess, private self-funded. I'm just trying to get a percentage distribution in terms of the revenues.
Mr. Chairman, through you, commercial insurance contributes approximately 22% of our overall revenue. Government entities, 72%. Self-pay, around 12%.
That's 106%. I'm just trying to get to the 100.
%72 government entities, and 28% commercial and self-pay together.
Okay. Okay, thank you much.
Mr. Chairman, through you. Through you, Mr. Chairman. it's gone on quite a bit since I'd asked to ask my question. Through you, I understood the chairman to ask you, and I think you answered in the affirmative, that when you took over, there was a clean slate for you to start with. And I think you said yes. Were you not aware of the Ernst & Young report that was sitting there that cost us, if Mike informed us correctly, close to $125,000? Were you not aware of the Ernst & Young report that had just been done?
Mr. Chairman, through you, sir, the Ernst & Young report that was at the HSA was basically a report talking about the job descriptions and the relevance of the job within the HSA. When I got there, a lot of the job description was not totally relevant to our operations because the healthcare environment is very dynamic and things are changing. And also recruitment is difficult within the HSA. And we use a portion of the Ernst & Young report to start the groundwork of our operations.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I want to move on to the
Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sorry, I know you have your set questions. In terms of the 72% that is generated by government, roughly, is the government generally a good paymaster? Do they pay the full 72% or do they generally not pay a portion of it?
Mr. Chairman, through you, generally they're a good payer, generally.
Okay, I'm very happy to hear that, Mr. Chairman, which then brings me to my next question. If of the 92 million and 28% of it is roughly the self-pay and insurance, would have basically been 26 million of your revenues, and I'm not including in that the government program, so 26 million is what we make from self-pay and the insurance companies. What I'm getting at is I noticed your provision for the 2016 was actually 14 million, or roughly 53%. So the question for us then is simply this: are the insurance companies paying? Because if more than half the revenues are now being we're making provisions for, then it means that somebody isn't paying, which is for me the biggest issue that the HSA has in terms of collecting money. So the question is, are the insurance companies paying?
Mr. Chairman, through you, yes, sir, they're paying. The denial ratio is around 3 to 4%, but it is not for the insurance company, but it's the portion that is relating to the patient that needs to pay out of pocket. But majority, the insurance, they are paying.
Well, the thing about it is then, if we have 26 million in revenues from commercial and self-paying customers, and we're basically not collecting 40 million of that, which basically leaves 12 million. So it means then that if the insurance companies are paying, based on that ratio, then it would assume that the 14 million would be the private people, and in essence, people showing up at the hospital then and just not paying. Well, that's what I'm trying to understand. So if the government is paying and insurance company is paying, why then is the bad debt so high?
Mr. Chairman, through you, majority of our bad debt is related to self-pay clients.
But we're talking to the tune of roughly 14 million now. Yeah, when you define self-pay, you're talking about the section of the co-pay for a privately insured person. Because government don't have any co-pay.
Mr. Chairman, the self-paying portion, the self-pay patient can be outright self-pay, or there's a co-pay or a deductible.
When you have somebody shows up and they say they're self-pay because they don't have health insurance, do you ask any questions as to why they don't have health insurance, or you just allow them to promise to pay and they don't pay?
Mr. Chairman, an interview, basically a front-end interview is conducted, and they will complete a promissory note. However, a notification goes to Health Insurance Commission to say this particular patient does not have health insurance and is required by law to have insurance.
Do you ask any questions of whether the person is employed, who they're employed by, or they're self-employed?
Mr.
That
Chairman,
part of the interview.
Mr. Chairman, I would say yes, sir.
Do you report the employer as well as the person?
Mr. Chairman, yes, we do, by the health notification form.
Mr. Austin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you. We're chatting, of course, about the unpaid debts to the HSA, which previous Auditor General reports have stated, as well as other witnesses to this committee, that these debts have been accumulated largely by public hospital system patients using either services or pharmaceuticals, not paying for those services. Since 2012, the HSA partnered with two collection agencies. I believe the one was Sunbelt Medical for overseas collections and a local company, the Cayman Islands National Credit Bureau, to recover local debts. Can you state for the benefit of this committee as well as the listening public how much of that total bad debt has been collected, and can you break it down in terms of what has been collected in overseas collections as well as what has been collected in local bad debt from the two companies?
Mr. Chairman, through you, sir. Sunbelt is an international collection company. I don't have the information for Sunbelt, but I do have the information for the local collection company. And HSA had given them 4.5 million, and they have collected less than 3%.
Less than 3%, Mr. Chairman. Less than 3%. Could you state of the local debts, how is that debt collection agency paid? Are they paid based on a percentage of collected assets, or is it a flat fee?
Mr. Chairman, through you, they charge the patient their administrative fee, and they provide HSA with the full amount that is collected.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And you recently awarded the collection agency to a law firm. Are they collecting on a percentage basis, or is it a fixed fee?
Mr. Chairman, we have just completed the RFP, and we are currently in negotiation with them as to the terms of the collection. So that has not yet been finalized.
But the terms of the collection was not part of the RFP on which they would have bid on? Why is that being negotiated after the fact?
Mr. Chairman, in terms of how they are going to execute the collection.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, what is the normal process before it becomes a bad debt? I mean, do you have internal processes within the HSA that goes after the debt first, and if they don't pay, then after what period do we put it out to an outside agency?
Mr. Chairman, through you, the HSA tries to work on debts between 1 to 365 days internally, and then we will outsource to a collection agency. Right now, we're not doing that, and we have just completed that RFP, and will be in the process of transferring some of our debts to them.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, which department is in charge of generally trying to get the first round of collections?
Patient Financial Services. Mr. Chairman, through you, Patient Financial Services.
Okay. Sorry.
Mr. Chairman, through you, I just want to point out through to the committee that we have beefed up our internal control, enhanced our internal control processes over the last year. And for the first 12-month period, from August 31st to 2016, the HSA collected 61 million. And for the similar period, 31st August 2017, we collected 95. That's a 34 million increase and 55% increase in our collection. And our bad debt for that period, 31st August 2016, provision was 15.5 million. August 31st, 2017, our provision is 7.4 million. That's a 52% improvement. We have been we have embarked on internal efforts such as reorganizing the PFS department in terms of collections. We are streamlining and improving our registration points, and we're also reviewing the delivery of our bills to the insurance company. Roughly 90% of our claims are going electronically.
Well, here is part of our big concern with this bad debt, and what we don't understand is why isn't it dealt with annually? But in terms of its accumulation, records of previous reports would show that for 11 years, from its inception to 2014, the bad debt accumulation was only 57 million. From 2014 to 2016, it's gone to 122 million, which is a $65 million increase in 2 years, as opposed to a $57 million accumulated over 11 years. How is that explained?
Mr. Chairman, when you look at our financials for 2015 and the debts between 1 to 365 days, the total accounts receivable was 42.1 million. And in 2016, the accounts between one days to 365 is 42.3 million. Just a 0.5% increase between that year, because HSA is trying to manage those debts internally between the 1 to 365 days.
But you still haven't explained how it has gone from 57 million for 11 years accumulated to 122 million in 2 years. And based on evidence you're giving us, if government is paying you all of this money, and this 19 million is billed on a patient per patient basis and not drawn down monthly or quarterly, and your insurance companies are paying you, how is it possible to accumulate all this bad debt?
Mr. Chairman, in 2015 and 2016, the insurance companies were paying. However, one of our major adjudication company were having some claims adjudication issue with the change of their TPA. So that would be reflected in the provision. But since 16-17, we have been submitting claims, and the adjudication are coming twice per month.
You lost me somewhere along the line. I don't understand.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, you asked why the provision was increasing. And I'm pointing out that in 2015 and 2016, parts of 2016, one of our major payer had some adjudication issues, and that was the reason why we had a bill.
But if you're actively negotiating the settlement of a debt, why is it classified as a bad debt?
Or, Mr. Chairman,
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, our bad debt provision is based on aging. And if the aging is a particular number of days, we take a provision percentage for that.
So your bad debt is strictly based on how long the bill is owed, not whether it's collectible or not.
Mr. Chairman, yes, sir.
Okay.
Sorry. Oh, continue. Sorry. No, I'm just looking at the 2014-2015 financial statements just to expand on what the chairman is asking. Through you, sir. At the end of 2014, the total account receivable was just under $69 million for 2014. And by the end of 2016, the total account receivable was 122 million. So in essence, it took 12 years to accumulate roughly $69 million in accounts receivable. but it took us basically 2 years to increase that amount by roughly that 53 million. Yeah, by 50. So yeah, so just to be clear, so in 12 years to the end of 2014, we accumulated $69 million in debt, but in the last 2 years, we added on 53 million in just a 2 year period. So there is serious non-collection right there. And I'm just going by the face of, and these are on page 20 of both the 2014-2015 financial statements and also page 20 of the 2015-2016 financial statements, and is in particular note 5 on accounts receivable is what I'm looking at, just so we're all on the same page. So 53 million growth in accounts receivable in a 2 year period. And that I think is, this is just, no, I'm just looking at us accounts receivable. So I'm just trying to understand that.
Mr. Chairman, through you, in 2015 and 2016, as I said before, the adjudication of a particular insurance company were having issues, and that is why for that 2 years there was a built up,
Sorry.
because our provision is based on aging.
But based on that, I mean, we're looking at 53 million growth, and we established that in last year for the 2016 that the non-government portion was 26 million. So it would basically mean that 2 years worth, 26 million times 2 is actually 52 million. So in essence, we basically went 2 years without collecting any private money if the government is actually paying.
Is something wrong with this picture, man? We need to find what it is. You think it's because they're conveniently placing things in bad debt to get it in the opposition books, or the stuff that they haven't billed for at all?
Mis-
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Chairman, through you, sir, we collected 19.3 million from the commercial insurance.
Is that in a 2 year period?
1 year period, sir.
So is government not paying you there?
The government is paying self-pay. That is our major contributor of our provision, sir. The self-pay account collection can range from 0 to 25% in that fiscal year or throughout. And within this current period, based on our improved collection and vigilance upfront at the registration point, our collection has improved from the self-pay portion.
Well, if that is the case, then through you, Mr. Chairman, then the percentage that was provided to this committee before, of 72% being government and 28% being, those numbers aren't adding up.
In the interest of time, can I ask a more global question? Do you make a recommendation to the board, to the CEO on an annual basis to write off bad debt based on the provisions that you have allowed for bad debt? Do you write off that provision every year?
Mr. Chairman, no, sir.
Why not?
Mr. Chairman, in order for us to write off our debts a presentation is made to the board, and depending on the standard that the board has taken, then an approval will be given.
Right, but you say you don't do it on a regular basis, once a year or whenever. When you finalize the year accounts and you have budgeted for 20 million in bad debt, do you ask the board to write off that 20 million because you have certified it as bad debt?
Mr. Chairman, no, sir.
What are your policies and procedures to qualify something as a bad debt? And when is that request made to the board to honor their bad debt provision in their account?
Mr. Chairman, the finance department will present the financials to the board, and the board will have to meet and make a decision as to what they're willing to write off. Right now, I do believe that the board has taken the position to transfer the provisions out to a collection agency.
But if you believe something is collectible, it shouldn't be a bad debt. That's why I'm asking how do you certify something as a bad debt? Is everything that is not paid at the time the service rendered considered a bad debt or certified by your department as a bad debt?
Mr. Chairman, it's the aging of the account balance. If the account balance is over 365, then a portion of that will be classified as a provision.
Okay, so you should at least be making to the board a recommendation for 2015 now to write off the bad debt provision that was allocated in the budget, because the 365 days would have expired on all of those debts. Is that done?
Mr. Chairman, no, sir.
Why not? Your policies and procedures doesn't provide for that, and hasn't the board agreed for that?
Mr. Chairman, the policies and procedures do provide for that, but I do believe that when the information goes through as a financial, the board might be reluctant to write off the debt. They prefer to try to see if there's anything collectible in that provision.
But if your policy says that any debt that is not collected within 365 days is a bad debt, that's how we do it based on aging, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. The board authorized a budget for you which contained a figure for you to write off as bad debt. My question is, why isn't the application made to the board for the board to honor this provision it gave to you? Because what we're getting here is we have this now 122 million, which according to the evidence you're providing with us, is unlikely to be collected. And have you done any analysis of that 122 million to determine by age or by effort made to collect that it is uncollectible, or do you believe that 122 million is a quasi bad debt in that you might collect it?
Mr. Chairman, the HSA makes every effort to collect its
That's not
accounts
the question I'm
receivable,
asking you,
but
ma'am. That's not the question I'm asking you. I understand you make every effort to collect it. You made every effort to collect it. You did not collect it. It was classified. You didn't collect it for a whole year. It is now classified as a bad debt. Why is it not written off? And why are you not making a recommendation to the board that it be written off on an annual basis instead of letting it accumulate to this level?
Mr. Chairman, the policy of the HSA is to make the recommendation to the board. However, at times when the recommendation is made, the board has to convene and decide if that's the path that they want to pursue.
Okay, can you send us a copy of the recommendation that you would have made for 2015 bad debt when you submitted the 2016 financials to the board? Can we get a copy of that recommendation?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, just so we can try to understand the challenges related to the level of bad debt, you stated that of the two collection agencies that the HSA partnered with since 2012, one of them being the Cayman Islands National Credit Bureau. If I remember correctly, and if I'm incorrect, I trust that you'll correct me. The debt that was given to that company was $4.2 million. You testified that they collected less than 3% of that, which is somewhere in the region of $126,000. When you answered the chairman's question that you do everything possible to collect this bad debt, can you outline to this committee what are some of the steps taken, whether by HSA or these debt collection agencies, to collect this bad debt? Is it more than a phone call? Is there legal ramifications to it, or do we take these persons to court? Can you please enlighten us as to how we specifically make attempts to collect this bad debt, either directly with the HSA or vis-a-vis the collection agencies?
Mr. Chairman, through you, we do phone calls. We send statements to the patient. Whenever the patient presents at the hospital, we inform the patient that there is an outstanding balance with the authority, and we try to make a payment plan with that patient. Also, with the collection agency, they will contact the patient either by email or telephone call and work out on a payment plan to service that debt.
Through you, Mr. Chairman. What is the complement of the Patient Financial Services Department?
Mr. Chairman, through you, the classification versus registration officers, collectors, billers, pre-cert officers, payment processors, that's a general complement.
Okay, and how much registration officers you would have, roughly?
Between 24 to about 28, sir.
And collectors?
Approximately 8 collectors, sir.
Billers?
4 billers.
Pre-cert officers?
2, sir.
And payment processors?
4, sir.
Okay. And so that'll be roughly 24, 32, 36, 40, roughly looking about 42 staff.
Yes, sir, approximately.
Okay. And how many how many managers / supervisors in that unit?
We have 1 supervisor, 1 manager, and 3 team leads, sir.
And 3 team lead. And I guess it'd be 1 team lead for each shift or something like that? Is that how it works?
No, the team leads are collectors and payment processors.
Okay. No problem. And in terms of experience, I mean, are you confident that you have the right team in place? To collect these funds.
Mr. Chairman, through you, sir, I do believe so, sir.
Okay. The 3 team leads, are they locals or?
Yes, sir. Mr.
Okay.
Chairman.
And the 1 supervisor person also local?
Yes, sir.
And the manager also local?
No, sir, that's an interim through a Cayman Islands company.
Interim through? Sorry, I don't understand.
Interim manager. No, sir. We're recruiting for that position right now.
And how long has that been going on?
It's vacant 2 months now.
And is that person, there's nobody in the organization that could have been promoted to that level, or
Mr. Chairman, not at this point, sir.
Sorry, you said this person came through an agency?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So you had, well, I guess we'll deal with the HR person. She coming next. But you didn't have time to recruit the person, but you had time to deal with an agency and make sure you were getting the right person and everything to get them. And how long is that contract for?
Mr. Chairman, we receive a resignation from that manager, and because of the processes that we have in place in order to provide continuity with reinforcing our control environment and keeping our collection up to par, we engage to have an interim person and then recruit for the position.
What about just
Because-
no succession planning? Nobody else in the organization acted for that person when they went on leave, or every time the person goes on leave, you get somebody from an agency?
Mr. Chairman, whenever that person goes off on leave, usually the leave for that person is usually the maximum 10 days, and myself, some of the team leads will act by taking some of the responsibilities for coverage of that position.
How long is your average recruitment?
Around 6 months, sir.
Beg your pardon? 6 months?
Here's where I'm trying to get to. Again, and this was just coming from the financial statement, page 9 from both 2014, 2015, and also page 9 from 2015, 2016. On those for 2014, 2015, the training budget was roughly $305,000. We spent $181,000. In 2015, 2016, the training budget increased to roughly $414,000, but we want to spend roughly $153,000. And the thing about it is, Ms. Booth, and this goes back now to the point I was making earlier, is that we're looking for, I guess, a sense of confidence. At least I am looking for a sense of confidence that these inefficiencies and these issues are something that are aware of by management and basically being dealt with. And if I'm going to have roughly more than 40 staff in one department and there's one resignation and we have to go to an agency to bring someone in to manage that unit, what it basically tells me is that of the 40 staff that are there before, there are pretty much no training, no investment or anything in them, that if there a vacancy does arise, and it did, that we had to basically go to an interim agency or interim company to bring in someone to head up the PFS, which... And the second issue is, and the reason why I asked the question that I asked, if they were local or not, because what I've found is that when it comes on to collections, local know-how is actually very important when you can know who is who and who to call to get what. And the reality of it is that you're going to bring in someone that's not local. Were they on island before, or where are they from originally, if you don't mind me asking?
Sorry.
The
Mr.
interim
Chairman,
manager.
The manager is from Jamaica.
Okay, so in essence, then we have 40 staff, the majority of which are Caymanians, and a vacancy arises, and rather than find one of those 40 to act, we basically went out to an agency, bring someone in, and this person is supposed to have the local know-how. If the major issue in payments or in collection, is the local self-paying people not paying, don't you think it'd be best to have a local person pretty much in charge of that section so they'll know exactly who's who and how to get it done?
Mr. Chairman, through you, the remit of this person is we're to advertise for the position, and one of the prerequisites, it needs to be a Caymanian who will fill that position.
Well, through you, Mr. Chairman, don't you think it would be best then to have a person at least, or having a rotation of the people who are employed there, because you do have 3 team leaders being rotated around during this interim time, as opposed to going out to an agency?
Mr. Chairman, through you, right now, the persons who are team lead are not really supervisors, and the skill set is not there in order for them to manage that department.
Through you, Mr.
And-
Chairman. Oh, sorry. Sorry. Through you, Mr. Chairman. How many resumes did these agencies send over?
Mr. Chairman, through you, one resume, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have no more questions.
Mr. Austin.
Mr. Chairman, thank you through you. Getting past the host of financial bad debts that we have, but seeking some, I guess, encouragement that we've learned something from our past mistakes. In addition to the bad debts, the HSA has spent hundreds of thousands of dollars. The government has spent hundreds of thousands of dollars settling lawsuits by Cynical. We introduced the care pay system, which was designed to prevent the accumulation of bad debt, but in reality, it actually cost us even more money. The Auditor General, at one point in time, recommended that an anti-fraud program be established and written into the policy and procedures of the HSA. Can you state whether or not this fraud program has yet been implemented, written, or considered to prevent the past mistakes from occurring again in the future?
Mr. Chairman, through you, a fraud policy has been developed.
Again, sorry, Mr. Chairman, a fraud policy has been developed. Has it been implemented?
Mr. Chairman, through you, no, sir.
Can you state why not?
Mr. Chairman, through you, we're waiting on the review of the board audit committee to sanction that policy before it's rolled out. It was developed internally by our staff.
Thank you.
One final.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, just one final statement I just want to make, Mr. Chairman. And Ms. Booth, I just want to thank you, first of all, for coming here today. And as I said at the outset, the two things that I was looking for from the financials and from your testimony here today was, one, a certain awareness of the issues, and then also for us to see if, at least get some comfort level, that the internal processes that supposed to be there are actually in place. And I'm going to stay right now for the record is that, one, that confidence level for me has not been met because some of these numbers and some of these analysis just don't add up. And maybe this is something that we can take offline in terms of getting some of the answers. But what is scary to me, and I'm going to say it now, and what I'm going to say to you, I'm going to say to every witness, is that there's a certain amount of nepotism that has been going on within the HSA. And I'm going to tell you right now, it's going to stop. It doesn't matter to me what had happened previously, even though there are a lot of lessons learned, but I can tell you for the next 4 years, while I'm a member of this legislative body, there's going to be an extra 2 pair of eyes on the HSA and its activities. And I'm going to tell you right now, and for everyone that is coming behind you also, that there's a culture inside the HSA that is already brewing, that's being developed, that is not in the best interest of good governance and accountability. And I'm going to tell you right now, you guys need to start looking, because I'm going to tell you, you will find yourself back here many times answering many questions. And the reason for that being is that, one, I am getting far too many complaints from staff at the HSA with regards to succession planning, training, and too much, quote unquote, the friend business that needs to stop. So I just want to state that right now. And within your area, there are too many complaints that we're being receiving now. This is something from the PSC standpoint that we will be asking the Auditor General to be taking a closer look at a lot of the HR policies and a lot of the HR issues, because I am still uncomfortable that we are at our maximum operating levels in that regard. So I just needed to put that out there. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, just one final clarification to me. In relation to the bad debt, you said earlier that you had issued an RFP and you have awarded that contract now to a law firm. HSM, was that the law firm that that won the bid?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
But you are now negotiating with them to determine how they're going to collect it and how they're going to be paid.
Mr. Chairman, we are discussing more effective ways in which we would like the collections of the outstanding accounts to be executed.
But that wasn't part of the RFP.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Well, how?
But
So
it's a part of the RFP, but the HSA need to ensure that in the execution of the agreement, all the requirements are captured and agreed by both parties.
But why are you so concerned about that if they can give you 100% of the fee that they collect? Shouldn't your objective just be that they collect the money and you're giving them the job to do it? Because you have the methodologies that you have been using, I can't really describe them as being successful. My concern is that we don't want those methodologies transferred to, now that you hired a big law firm to do it, to them, and then they can come back and say, well, we couldn't collect it because you put these limitations on us. All of that should have been in the RFP. And if they wanted, they were based, the RFP, I would have thought that the successful bidder would have been awarded based on their methodologies to collect it and the likelihood of them collecting it, and not in a position where you award it to them, because I haven't seen the RFP, but then you turn around now and you're going to negotiate what limits and controls and methodologies you're going to put on them to collect it?
Mr. Chairman, in terms of the agreement, the prior collection agency, the agreement was for them to charge the patient an administrative fee. This is not the case in the second RFP. It's a percentage of the collection that the company will take. So we're looking at giving them a period in which they need to collect X amount to see what returns we'll be able to obtain from the outstanding debt. So it's not changing the RFP.
Okay, but you're going to pay a law firm a commission, which may include legal activities in court. Is that legal?
No.
Under our system of billing for lawyers? Are lawyers in this country now allowed to charge on a percentage basis for appearance in court?
Mr. Chairman, that's a separate thing. Fees are different. Fees for going to court is separate and apart from the collection fees.
So you're going to pay them, you're going to agree that they will, if they write a letter and they collect $100, they will get a percentage of that $100. If they have to take the person to court to collect it, you are going to pay them for the court charges separately from the commission on the collection?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, and remember that when things go to court, there's some requirement or that the law firm we should be able to recoup that legal fee from the patient.
Anyway, just to bring this to a close, I want to remind you. Sorry, go ahead.
Just one last question, Mr. Chairman.
Are we running late?
We've understood you have about 40 staff in your section. You understand that one person is on secondment from a, what do you call those firms?
Agency. I don't know.
The firms that get you temporaries. How many staff do you have in your section that's under contract that are not Caymanian? Of the 40?
I think it's one in that section, sir.
Thank you very much.
I just want to remind you of all of a statement made by the Honorable Financial Secretary, Mr. Kenneth Jefferson, when you all were here on Wednesday, September the 7th, 2016, dealing with the 2014 and 2015 accounts. And Mr. Jefferson, I hope you don't mind me quoting you, but this is so informative, but obviously it has been completely ignored. And I don't take kindly to people like Mr. Jefferson giving you all advice and it's completely ignored. So I'm going to read verbatim what he said, with the hope that it is going to be, attention is going to be paid for it now. And I quote, Mr. Chairman, if I could just add a few comments. Excuse me, sir. I am certainly not meaning to turn this into an accounting lesson or anything, but there is a very important distinction between a bad debt and a doubtful debt. A debt that is deemed to be a bad debt should be written off completely, immediately. A debt that is deemed to be doubtful, obviously from its very terminology, a doubtful debt is a debt that would then give rise to a provision, and the extent of that provision can vary. It can be, as an organization, you may deem that it is fairly good on collection, but there is some doubt, so the percentage that we put into the provision for doubtful debt could be 25%. If you're very worried about it, it could become 80% or it could be 90%. But a debt that is completely bad and you have no doubt about it should be written off completely, and that debt should not form part of the provision. We keep getting back to what is your definition of a bad debt. And I am very troubled by the fact that you say all of this is bad debt, but you hope to collect it, and there is no annual write-off of the bad debt that is what has been certified as a bad debt as opposed to a doubtful debt. You need to take the suggestion of the Financial Secretary seriously and complete the analysis ASAP, because we asked for this in September 2016, and obviously it hasn't been done. That this debt be analyzed to what is bad debt and what is doubtful debt. If you're in, from what you have said this morning, it appears that once you haven't collected in a year, you transfer it from doubtful debt to bad debt. And if it goes on a bad debt, the committee tends to agree or agrees fully with the Financial Secretary. If you have certified it as a bad debt, it should be written off and not continued to be carried on your books as a doubtful debt. Thank you very much for your time, ma'am. And
Thank you.
Brenda Riley. I do solemnly, sincerely, and truly declare and affirm that evidence I shall give in this Honorable Legislative Assembly shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Thank you. Good morning, Mrs. Riley, and
Mr. Chair.
we want to welcome you to the committee and thank you for taking the time to come down here. I think this is your first appearance before the PAC, so if you could give us a summary of your roles and responsibilities within the HSE, I think that would be a good place to start.
I am the Human Resources Director, and I'm responsible for the strategic direction of the organization as it relates to its employees. Yes, it is.
Thank you.
What are the hiring policies of the HSE in terms of encouraging Caymanians to apply and to get positions at the HSE?
We have we invite people through advertisement or career fairs or reach out to people overseas, summer internship, those kinds of programs. Encourage Caymanians to come to the workforce.
Okay. How much?
Mr. Chairman, before you go that, this is the first time you've come before this committee.
Yes,
Okay,
Mr. Chairman, through you.
Yes, ma'am, through the chairman. Can you give us an idea of your previous experience or your qualifications in HR, please?
Sure. My qualification is a master's in human resources management from the Portsmouth University, the UK. Experience, I've been working at the organization from 1993, and I've grown through that organization to this position.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
How much involvement did you have in the rationale in the decision-making process to do self-insurance for your health insurance for your employees versus contracting with a provider?
We're actually contracting with Brit-K to offer health insurance where they administer the plan, if that's what you're asking, Mr. Chairman.
Well, that's not the evidence that has been given to this committee. When did you go fully to Brit-K?
We started in, I think it's 2012, I think.
Well,
That's
okay.
right.
The last evidence we were given at this committee in September last year was that the HSA self-insures and they only use Brit-K for anything over $300,000, mostly for overseas care. So you can't have both. You have one or the other.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, let me explain that. For the local care, the HSA uses the Brit-K to administer that, and that's covered through the HSA. For overseas care, we use Brit-K through their third-party network to administer healthcare benefits.
Sergeant at Arms, can you determine who the people are in the gallery and make sure that they're not potential witnesses, please? Okay. All right. So you say that you.
For the overseas care,
No,
Mr.
let's talk about. We'll separate. Let's talk about the local care.
Right.
You use Brit-K to administer your care,
Here, yes, at the HSA, yes, sir.
but you don't
Yes,
buy
Mr.
insurance from them.
No, we don't. We just pay for
But why-
administration fees.
But
Yes.
why would you be paying them an admin? Can you administer your own health care in your own organization?
I think the background of that, Mr. Chairman, was that to make sure we have all the data and to help us as well with that overseas aspect of managing expenses associated with persons that we send overseas.
But doesn't most of the private insurance companies and Synoco use you all as a means of managing the healthcare when you refer somebody overseas for healthcare? I.e., if you send me overseas for heart, they don't turn around and treat me for burn foot?
I cannot speak to back then, but what I can speak for is now Brit K is managing that, sir. Mr. Chairman.
At what cost?
I don't have the details on that, sir. I can get that if I...
Please.
Sure.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, any reason why Brit K as opposed to Cynical?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I know we did an RFP some time ago, and they came out a successful bidder. That is as much as I'm aware of.
No, sorry, through you, Mr. Chairman. Unfortunately, Ms. Riley, it don't work like that down here. We are expecting civil servants and everyone to get insurance through Cynical. Cynical is the person that actually pays, or the entity via the government that pays the most money into the HSA. When business is done between two government entities, regardless of cost or whatever, it still nets to zero when we look at the entire public service. So if we're now being made to understand that the hospital or the HSA, who is the biggest customer for Cynical, when their time comes where they actually need services, they turn around and go get a private sector company, then what does that say about Cynical or Cynical ability to administer these kind of benefits or these kind of benefits? What does it say to the public when the HSA is using, no offense, but a competitor of Cynical?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, your concerns are noted. Unfortunately, I cannot give you the background into the thought process why Cynical was not used at that time.
But are you,
Sir.
are you the person responsible for managing employee benefits?
Mr. Chairman, I am, but for the RFP section, that is how I was involved in terms of, I don't know the details into the background.
Sorry,
before then.
through you, Mr. Chairman. One of the reasons why we ask people to explain their roles and responsibilities is that we don't want to ask someone a question to which it falls outside of their remit. In your opening statement, you basically said that you were in charge of the strategic direction or something along the line as it relates to employee benefits. Are we now to understand, this committee is to understand that something as basic as the strategy direction that should be taken for employee benefits, you were not consulted on?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, as I said, we started this in 2012. I was not the HR director then. I became the HR director in April, I believe. And the strategy behind who goes where or what company we use, I am not familiar with it. I do know that from a competitive bid, we really decided to go through Brit K.
Sorry, so through you, Mr. Chairman, so within the 5 years that you've been there, are we to understand then that at no point did you guys ever sit back and revisit this, even from a cost or an efficiency standpoint, to see if it was to send it back out to bid or revisit the tendering process?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, unfortunately, I'm not familiar with that piece of information.
Okay. Through you, Mr. Chairman, I realize that this witness had missed part of my opening statement, and I just want to repeat it so you can understand, Ms. Riley, where we're coming from. One of the concepts that I use within business is a balanced scorecard approach, where we look at financial processes, we look at financial performance, we look at internal processes, we look at customer service levels, and we also look at basically new initiatives to see exactly if the HSC or whichever entity is staying current. What we're looking for today from the testimonies that we are to receive is, one, the internal controls, if they're there, to ensure that the HSA is operating efficiently, and two, the people charged with that responsibility are aware of those responsibilities and provide a committee with some level of comfort that, in essence, they're the one to do the job. Because what we're looking for at the end of the day is that, based on these reports that I've gone through, and just for the record, these are all public documents. I've read the Ensuring Quality Health Care and a Healthy Population, which was put out by the Auditor General in January 2017. Also, the Cayman Islands Health System by the Auditor General 2017. The National Health Policy and Strategic Plan for the Cayman Islands 2012 to 2017, and also the 2014, 2015, and 2015, 2016 financial statement. So that is how I prepared coming for this committee. And based on what it is I've been reading in these reports, it does not paint a good process, or don't provide me the level of comfort or confidence that I need within the HSA. And when you understand how important the HSA is to the overall Cayman Islands economy, we need a certain level of confidence, and the Caymanian people also need a certain level of confidence that the people who are in charge of the HSA, in charge of the strategic direction and the day-to-day operations, are the ones that are carrying it out. So what we're looking for, if this is something that falls under your remit, is that, one, we're looking for answers. If you don't have it, then that's fine. Nothing wrong with sending back some answers. But what we're looking for is, one, the more strategic direction, and then two, the level of efficiencies, and then three, your understanding of your role and what it is that is expected of you within this role. So to basically say that this happened before your time doesn't because that doesn't bode well, because at the end of the day, it is now your responsibility. I mean, if that is the case, every witness can come here and say what they started from was from the 70s, the 80s. It don't work like that within an authority. So that is really what it is that we're looking for. I know this is your first time, so I'm just trying to explain to you. Don't worry, it's my first time too, so don't feel bad. But I've watched it enough on TV.
Mr. Austin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you. Ms. Riley, thank you for being here. From a human resources standpoint, the Auditor General noted that for the year ending 30th of June 2016, overtime expenses amounted to $2.9 million, which represented an increase of some 310% over and above that which was budgeted for. In her report, the Auditor General stated, and I quote, "Overall, the government lacked the resources and information required to manage the healthcare system effectively." We heard earlier in terms of the available staff complement for just one department alone, that being Patient Financial Services, who are charged with recouping some of this bad debt. That department alone has some 40 staff. My question is threefold, and I'll ask them all at once. One, can you state, for the benefit of this committee, what is the total staff complement of the HSA? Two, can you state whether or not the HSA has achieved the desired staff complement that would eliminate or reduce this reliance on overtime? And three, if not, how many additional staff are needed to meet this threshold? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, the first question, if I understand you correctly, the overtime cost, can you restate that, please?
Yes, I was just stating that in June 2016, overtime amounted to $2.9 million, or an increase of 310%. Right. Presumably, the limitation of staff are working more hours to fill the gap. So the question is, can you state what is the total staff complement for the HSA? Can you state whether that staff complement has achieved the desired complement that would otherwise reduce this overtime? And if not, how many additional staff would the HSA require in order to meet that threshold?
The total, through you, Mr. Chairman, pardon me for not saying through you, Mr. Chairman, the total count for budgeted positions is 890, and on a monthly basis, roughly 833 are on staff at any given time. That is as a result of turnover. Some of the overtime totals, this year we have had significant turnover in areas such as nursing and mostly nursing. So over time, you'd see some overtime coming through that area.
Again, thank you. You've answered the first question. Your total staff complement is 890 with 833 staff
Right.
On staff.
Right.
Is this number sufficient to meet the staffing requirements of the HSA?
we have had for the next budget year. Oh my goodness. Sorry, Mr. Chairman. Through
that's
you,
fine,
Mr.
that's fine.
Chairman.
Once you deal with that the first time, you don't have to repeat it every time. You have established the protocol.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. We've budgeted because we've identified some areas that needs to be enhanced, and for the next budget year, we have I think it's about 9 something. I don't have the exact information for that, but it's roughly 900 and something. We're bringing that total up to budgeted amount up to help us to close those gaps.
Just so I can understand, total staff complement presently of 890, which is 10 away from 900.
Right.
And
Something.
the budget is 890,
But actually, it's
833
833.
on staff. To give this committee and the listening public some understanding as to how many additional staff are needed, of the 9 something, is it closer to 910 or is it closer to 950?
Maybe about 930.
930.
And some of those areas are set aside that we should be making revenue from them.
So an increase of in the region of 100 additional staff.
If it's 890 and 930, no, pardon me.
So 40 additional staff.
About 40, that's
About
correct.
40 additional staff.
Yeah, about 20 something in the output and the balance on the HSA.
All right. Of that 40 increase that is needed, are these administrative staff or in the areas where you're seeing the most turnover in the medical staff, nursing, for example?
Some in nursing, but it's mostly clinical because we had to show that we're going to be able to fund these positions. So physicians, nurses, and then some clinical support staff to go with that.
In terms of your nursing staff complement, are you all right?
I'm okay. I'll be okay. Thank you
you
for asking.
Need a moment? Need a water?
I'm kind of wheezing, but that's okay. It's
Really?
brand new.
The PSA has that effect. Don't feel so bad. They pride
That's
themselves on it, really.
I'll be okay. Thank you.
Of the staffing resources as it relates to nursing in particular, we have the School of Nursing at UCCI right now.
Right.
Have you identified any staff that could potentially be attracted from that nursing program? Or can you state to this committee what efforts have been made to identify these additional sources and from where will they come from?
Absolutely. We have nurses that were actually on staff at the HSA that we supported to do the nursing training. And they're scheduled to return after they have finished their registration enrollment. Through you, Mr.
Thank you.
Chairman, I do need some water. Thank you.
Okay, but
Mr.
your
Chairman,
staff work. Does your staff work an 8-hour shift or a 12-hour shift?
It depends on the area. Most clinical staff do 12-hour shifts.
first, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Of the 833 staff, Ms. Riley, how much are Cayman in? How many are Cayman in?
Okay. %57%
57.
for 476 employees
Okay.
are listed on the books as Caymanians, and that does not include PR or persons married to Caymanian.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Riley. Now,
Cannot believe.
Here's where I'm just trying to get my head wrapped around. I'm looking at the last compendium of statistics that was released about a little over 2 weeks ago by the Economics and Statistics Office, and in particular, page 53 of the compendium of statistics. When I look at the number of people admitted to the hospital, in 2012, 5,301, 2013, 4,722, 2014, 4,927, 2015, 4,955, and 2016, 4,667. And also notice that there is a steady decrease also in the number of dental clinic patients between 2012 and 2016.
You need a break, ma'am? Okay.
I do.
Okay.
Okay. You have an inhaler or something you can use with you? You didn't bring your medication. You have asthma?
Not diagnosed.
You want us to call 911 for you?
I think I'll be fine. I just need a moment. And if I could get the water, Mr. Chairman.
Just take a break.
Sarge, you're needed in the chambers, please.